newsletters,
Yeah.
so they're up.
Thanks.
But like the school committee, because we had a comment that,
Thanks for
you
going
know,
live.
they looking.
Good evening. It is 7 p.m. on October 22nd, 2018. This is the Sutton School Committee. Call the meeting to order. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next order of business is the Citizens Forum. Discussion or comments regarding individuals should be avoided so as to not violate any individual's rights. Do we have anybody to speak? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item, the consent agenda. These are the minutes from October 1st and the bill schedules from October 4th, October 11th, and October 18th.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Next item is to approve the Sutton Concert Choir field trip with Cindy Kerr.
Welcome.
It's
the chairs.
It's the chairs.
I'm just really short, so.
No, but the chairs are really short too.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, Mr. Edwards, Mr. Friend, and school committee members. Thank you all for the opportunity to advocate for our students, our choral students specifically, and thank you for your time this evening. Before we get started, I'm going to follow in Mr. Falvo's footsteps by inviting you to our all-school choral collaborative concert that's on December 12th, where we will feature a combined choral number called Give Us Hope. It's by Jim Papoulis. And the song can be heard as you leave the 9/11 Museum in New York City. It's a pretty powerful message of hope. And the vocal ensembles are combining together to hopefully to perform the piece, first of all, but also potentially to have, I've been talking with Jim Papoulis, who's the composer of the piece, to come in and maybe do a workshop with our students. So we'll keep you posted on that event, because he's a pretty amazing guy. I'm also excited to share with you our trip to Disney. And I think y'all have that itinerary in front of you, yes? Yep. So I can hopefully summarize a little bit the highlights of the trip for you. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll try to keep it short, but Wednesday evening, I actually kind of tightened this up a little bit. So we'll have the bag check, because we don't have a lot of kids. It's going to be pretty quick. We'll rehearse our music. We'll meet with the parents and have, a little question and answer. And we should be able to get the kids home by 7, or leaving by 7:30. So I've buttoned that up a little bit. Thursday, we're leaving very early in the morning. They're happy about that, so 4 o'clock or 4:15 or whatever it is. But the nice thing is that we're leaving at 7:55, and we'll get down there at 10:30, so it gives them a really full day at Magic Kingdom. The second day highlights the Disney Performing Arts Workshop called Disney Sings. This is a 2.5-hour workshop. The students will record a solo excerpt from a Disney animated feature film soundtrack, learn audition skills, discover new vocal techniques, and more under the guidance of one of the professional Disney vocalists and performers there. And this is all in a recording studio environment, so it's really a cool opportunity for them. And then following the workshop, they're going to be going to Epcot and hopefully meeting most of the members of the Voices of Liberty and seeing a performance there. I actually have been coached by 2 of the members, and one of them's the music director down there, Tony DeRosa. So I'm really hoping that they're going to be around so I can introduce them personally. Then we'll go back to Epcot, so they'll be spending, the rest of the day there at Epcot. Day 3 is performance day. So the performance is a show package that the kids will sing in Disney Springs. So there's a stage there at Disney Springs, and so they'll be performing. And from there, they'll go to Animal Kingdom. And I guess the features of the Animal Kingdom piece is the musical Finding Nemo and, of course, Rivers of Light. So those are some highlights for the day after the performance. And day 4, this is our short day. We're currently planning to revisit one of the parks during the morning hours, and then, of course, leaving early afternoon to shuttle to the airport to take the flight. And the kid's going to be home by 8:15. That's actually kind of pushed out a little, so they might even be earlier, which I'm hopeful, get him home. All right, so the trip includes 4 full dinners. So all of their dinners are paid for, 3 breakfasts, chaperone and director fees, round-trip airfare, busing in Florida, Disney's All-Star Movie Resort Hotel, park tickets for Magic Kingdom, Epcot, and Animal Kingdom, the 2.5-hour Disney Performing Arts and recording session, the Voices of Liberty, all the performances, blah, blah, blah. And the performance also at the Disney Resort. So the total cost of the trip is approximately $1,300. This is a fabulous deal when you take into consideration all of the things the students will experience in the 4-day, 3-night trip. It's our hope and intent that the students, all of the students will be able to attend. And I've talked to them a little bit about if there's a financial burden, that we will find a way somehow to be able to work with the parents to help them make the trip a reality for them. That being said, we actually have a little bit already in the Chorus fundraising account, and we are working on offsetting the cost of the trip with right now, we already have a 45-minute show package at Sturbridge Village for Christmas by Candlelight, which they're going to receive a stipend for. That's on November 30th. We have a bake sale scheduled on the 21st of November. That's our little half day. And we also have 2 open mic fundraisers on our planning schedule that we did a few years ago and did really well with, and that was opportunity actually for our students, so it was a really cool event. For chaperoning, we have a few staff members that are interested in going, and we also have a few 4-H parents that are interested in going. We have not made any final decisions on that, but hopefully have that planned and buttoned down within the next month. I think that's it. I can't think of anything else. Questions?
So the price includes the airfare, the hotel, all the experience?
Everything.
That's very good.
It's pretty amazing.
How
yeah.
many, 4 to a room?
4 to a room, except for our boy who's got 1 room all to himself.
Okay. And what about lunches? They're responsible for their lunches?
Yes.
Okay.
But we're hoping, that with the, full dinner, full breakfast, and the first day, I'm asking them to bring a snack and, bagged lunch so that they can just have that. And hopefully they'll make do. Yeah.
Great.
When you listen to the Voices of Liberty get underneath the dome, the sound
Yeah.
is
Acoustics are
spectacular.
amazing, aren't they?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Voices of Liberty are just fabulous.
Phenomenal. If you
Yeah.
haven't seen, phenomenal.
I also know one of the basses that sings with them too, Carl Hudson, so I've worked with them personally, which is cool.
It sounds like a great trip.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. really-
Bring
really
sunscreen.
about it.
No
Yeah,
sunburn.
and that time is.
No sunburn.
But either pack it or bring a small volume.
Yeah.
And I
Put
hear-
it, bring it and put
and
it
I
on,
hear,
how's that?
It rains, right, every day or
Mhm.
something, even a little bit, but it rains a little bit.
Sounds cool.
Somebody like to
Sounds
make
like
a
a lot of
motion?
fun.
I move to approve the Sutton Concert Choir field trip to Florida as presented.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's great.
Have a great time.
Yeah.
All right,
Have fun.
thank you so much.
Next item is the elementary school update with Ms. Harrison.
Welcome.
Good evening.
things are going really well at the elementary school, I'm happy to say.
Good.
Good start to the year. We're starting off with Atlas Rubicon because all of our math now is aligned and our teachers starting to use it, which is really great. That's taken a while, but it's done. The teachers are now, that are involved in inputting the curriculum, are working on ELA and science. And they're inputting that curriculum into ABBAS as well. So hopefully we will get there and it will be used as it should be, and it will be great for new teachers that come in and for the teachers that are there. So we have a mapped curriculum with all our subject areas. The last one will be social studies, which we are finally getting those standards aligned by the state as well. Professional development has gone well. We've covered topics such as ALS training, which was very, very effective. We had an actual training where the teachers were involved in, if it was an actual event, and we broke into groups, and Officer McGee ran that with the support of policemen from other towns and in Sutton, and it went really, really well. He was pleased. We have a new diversity council, and I think I might have spoken about that in the past, I'm not sure. It came out of our district learning team's needs for diversity and things we're working on. And so much good has come out of it. We had a speaker, Lisa Tulson, who came in and spoke to us on diversity, equity, and inclusion to the staff for PD. It was very, very well received, and she was really, really powerful in her message to us about that. We have smartboard training going on because, as you know, we all have smartboards now. And the last thing we've had training in is with Mark, that's the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Center, and myself and 3 others from the school went and had a training so that we can train the trainer, which is really important, and that was also great. And they actually are tied with our DA, Joseph Early, who works with Ellen Miller, and it's down a little bit in the agenda here, but Ellen Miller came to our school last Friday, and she talked about bullying and cyberbullying with our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, and I have to say it was a really strong message she got to them about the importance of being mindful of cyberbullying especially, and bullying in general. So that was really good to get Ellen in. We try to have her every year. We again are having John Puccino, our storyteller from Amherst, who comes in to teach personal narrative writing to our students. We were gonna think about skipping it this year, but we realized the teachers really enjoy having him in, and we get a grant from the Massachusetts Cultural Council for that. And I've actually, that is for $5,000, but it's a little bit more than that, so I've applied for a grant from the Sutton Cultural Council, so I'm waiting to hear on that to hopefully get the full amount we need to pay Mr. Porcino for his time. He comes in to every classroom 5 days, and it makes a big difference in motivating them to write, and which goes along with our district goal this year, which is writing. So I'm happy to see that that's all tied together. We had Mr. Peace. He comes from Michigan. He's a motivational speaker on kindness and respect. This was a great event that was brought to us by the Diversity Council and funded by our PTO. And he was magical. If anybody has heard, if their kids were there, I don't know. Yeah, you would have heard maybe, Peter.
Yep.
He got the whole crowd going. It was amazing. And the message of, from the heart, being kind, no need for disrespect, like it was awesome. And he was there for actually K through 5, 2 different sessions. And the message he gave to K to 2 was a little bit different than 3 to 5. The kids and the teachers and the staff, everybody was so motivated, and he actually sold t-shirts, and we weren't going there, but at the end of the day, it gets to be 2 o'clock, and the teachers are calling me, I wanna buy a t-shirt, so everyone's down in the office, and they're giving them his money. He's got his whole bag of t-shirts, so it was kind of fun. We also had a visit to the school from Service Dog, which comes from Melanie Amir. That ties to the 3rd grade curriculum, where they do a story about a guide dog. She has come every year to all 3rd grade students, and it's, again, very well received. We are bringing back Green Bean workshops with Stories to Stage, so the students that had artwork that was selected were honored at a little assembly that we had, and now those stories are gonna be made into screenplays, and the kids are gonna try out for parts, and that will come in March. That has been really great to bring that piece of the arts to our school. spoke about Ellen Miller, so I'm good with that. We have Rad Kids going on with 3rd grade. That is a personal empowerment safety education program. It's actually one that we have in the nation. And through role play and fun activities, based education, the kids develop skills to recognize violence and things of the nature. Mr. Schweitzer and Officer McGee are running that, and they do an exceptional job, I have to say. This Friday and next Monday, we have a walking trip to the town library for grade 4. And they get to go around and learn about the different genres of books and what the library is about, and that has always gone well every year, and we're having it again this year. We get after school enrichment begin, and I think tomorrow is Wednesday is session 3. It's gone very well. We have a lot of different things offered, and we have a lot of students that are involved in that. So that's another perk to our after-school program. One of our big things this year, and you might have noticed it in the Chronicle if anybody read it, Officer McGee is naming a Junior Patrol Officer of the Week. Honestly, it's making my job so big because they all want it. So to get to be a junior officer, patrol officer, you have to show kindness, respect, role model, all those things. So today we nominated another student. We went up to grade 5, and it was actually Austin Gasca. And so we take a picture, and he's really proud of it, Officer McGee. He has a hat, a real literal, it fits a child, but it's a true hat, and badge, which is the real thing, but for a kid. So we've had about 5 now, I think, and Robert Fucci from the Chronicle came in to do a write-up on the Mr. Peace thing, and then he learned about this, so now he's all about that, so send him in. So it's kind of a great thing, the kids will love it. They wear the hat literally all week, and the badge, and they return it to me on Friday for the next kid to get it on Monday. And obviously he is very careful to Clorox it and make sure it's all set. Kids Night Out was Friday night. That's for kids in grades K to grade 3. And Fun Night Out is this coming Friday night, and they do a trunk or treat, which is brought to us by Sarah Stone, who's really involved with SEFT, and in the PTO brings it to us as well. So cars come to the parking lot of the, I don't know if you know about it, to the elementary school, and I think we had like 30 last year. I think probably have the same or more this year, and the kids trick or treat into the trunks of the car. For kids that may not live in a neighborhood for actual Halloween. And then the 4th and 5th graders, when they're done, they come right in for a Fun Night Out, which is great. And our PTO for Fun Night Out with Cheryl Sullivan and Casey Valancourt and all the PTO members, the volunteers. I tell you, our school wouldn't be what it is without them. So our teachers are working hard, everybody's working hard, and everything's going great in the elementary school. Questions?
Any
It's a
questions?
big thanks to
Yeah.
those that do the volunteering
We
for the
have-
fun night out
Yeah.
after the
Yeah.
trunk or treat candy, because that's
It's
just gonna add to the excitement.
And it's the setup and cleanup, and honestly, I've seen it, it's a lot, and also kudos to our custodial staff who are there to clean up at the very end of it and be there the whole time to help out, so things are good.
See standards change, as the
Excuse me?
states change standards, what's that do to work with Atlas?
So what happened is the state changed with the science, for example, they changed the standards for what was gonna be taught at each grade level.
Right.
So it's really good because now we have, it took a while to be sure that everybody got what they needed by the time they take the MCAS, and
Right.
not that it's about the MCAS, but in 5th grade we have to cover certain standards. So our teachers have completely aligned what we need in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and they've done a great job with letting me know what materials they need and resources they need, and they've been able to purchase those. And we've tied literature to it as well, so they're able to teach the science through the ELA, and so things are really good, but that's how the state did it. For example, they were teaching rocks and minerals in 5th grade, I think they're teaching it in 4th grade now. So things, and solar system has changed, so different topics changed to grade levels, and we've aligned it to each grade level.
And does Atlas help you move that around any easier or harder, or?
Well, what it is I don't think we want to start inputting the curriculum into Atlas until we had the right curriculum to input. So now we're able to do that, which is great. So we're at a point now where the math is done and the ELA is all set curriculum-wise. as is the science, and now the social studies has changed a bit, but they're set too, so once we have that ready to go, but it just takes a little bit of time. And we have great teachers that are supporting us in taking the lead on that, for the inputting of that information to the curriculum. And that's
The way it
a
is.
wrap for the
Excellent.
That's a
Thank you.
lot.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Next, we'll have the middle school update with Mr. Goyette.
So middle school has equally been very busy. I think the first shout out should be to the Sutton grounds people because we've used the nature trail, and prior to the beginning of the school year, we looked at the nature trail and it was a little bit of a sketchy mess. And when Mr. Cummins went out to do his prehistoric project, it was nice, it was cleaned, it was well put together, and then Mr. Vajan used it as well. So, you know, that really was nice of the town to take care of that for us. We used our PD days in October, the half day and the full day, to really secure the STEM week that started today. I can tell you that the teachers really appreciated that day and a half to really go back through the training that they received this summer and really put it together for the kids. I was lucky enough to do it today with a group of kids. It was a lot of fun. We collected our DNA, we made DNA strands with beads, we made cells, we looked at cells under the microscope, we talked about diagnosing a patient with sickle cell anemia. They played doctor, patient with some cards, and they read about the patient that came in. They role-played a little bit, and they tried to diagnose what the person had with suggestions, and they learned a little bit about the cycle of how you actually diagnose a patient. And it felt a little rushed, I'm not gonna lie. We had a lot of stuff in our day today, but I think overall the kids had a good time, and they really enjoyed what they were doing. So that was STEM week. I look forward to the showcases on Friday, where sixth graders will tell you everything they know about building a lunar colony. Seventh grade will talk all about kinetic sculpturing and the physics behind that. And eighth grade will tell you all about surgical techniques and what it feels like to be involved in the medical field.
Just one other point, the Commissioner of Education is going to be coming
Excuse
here.
me?
Oh, I thought you were done with that. I apologize, Mr. Graham.
I will
I thought
let
you were
know
leaving that
when you-
off.
I'll let you know when you're ready.
That's how you
Mr.
do it,
Friend was
huh?
saying.
Oh, my goodness.
The commissioner, so I2 Learning has been a really great partner for us. They really have been contacting us, making sure we have everything we need, making sure that we have all the materials prior. They've been in contact with us about securing the Commissioner of Education, who will be coming on Thursday, the 12th. We've also reached out to Representative Fatman to come. He as well is going to come on that Thursday at 12 o'clock. And we've reached out to the local press to see if we can get some coverage in the local newspapers. So we really have kind of tried really hard to get the message out. I know my counterpart in the elementary school has invited the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders to come over during that showcase. And they're really jazzed to come over and see what we have done at the middle school with the STEM week. So it's pretty exciting. There's a lot of buzz. There's some good energy. Normally I see kids running around, but they were really running today to get back into their classes to see what they were going to do next. It was nice to see. Washington, D.C. trip has filled up. We have roughly 106 students who have signed up out of the 132. Because we're at that 106 number, we still have seats on the bus available, and we'll try to fill those up a little bit, see if many more classmates who decided that they didn't want to go, maybe they now want to go. We have some financial backers who are helping us with some of the students who need some financial support. Mr. Friedman's already exploring activities that the students are staying behind can participate in. We're going at the same time Millbury is going, so he is trying to tie up a little bit of a Millbury-Sutton piece together so we can cost share if we go out and do something. I think I mentioned the 50-50 raffle that the girls did with a couple of the guys, and we did that homecoming event in Grafton, and they raised almost $600. Butter Braids will be the next fundraiser. That'll be starting very soon. All the kids know to hit me up. I'm good for at least 4. And I'm still looking for some help with the prizes for the February calendar fundraiser, which every day is a prize, and every kid can sell the calendar to anybody. And it's $10 a calendar, and it's pure profit. So if I sell 10 as a kid, I would receive $100 towards my trip, and we would just pick a prize every single day for the people who bought the calendar to see, you know, hey, guess what? You won something really cool. So that's going on. The PTO fundraiser and I have been very busy. We wrapped up our pie sales and wrapping paper. I think we did pretty well. I'm not telling Mr. Friend how much we made because he always asks. It's none of his business. T&O is this Friday, and again, if any parents are watching, we do need your help. It is the Halloween T&O, and I know that the elementary school is also doing Tweens Night Out, Kids Night Out, and so we have some parents that straddle, where should I be, where do I need to be, but we need you in the middle school a little bit. Low stakes writing is going well. I just currently took the data from October, and we are increasing it just by a little bit from the baseline that we established in September, which was great. Just a message from Mrs. Carden and Mr. Stone, the middle school cross-country coaches. They want you to know that the cross-country team is killing it. The boys and girls team have only one loss this year, and they've been a really positive group. The 7th grade girls won the Ocean State meet overall, and both boys and girls received medals, as well as the Little Wave cross-country meet. Students have improved their times, and the best part is they've been really positive with each other, and they've been great at cheering on their teammates. So, you know, being able to participate in the middle school sports, you learn how to be a good sports person and cheer on everybody. And then on the 27th, we have our district championship meet. So that'll be coming up to a close. As far as clubs go, we've had fantasy football running, slime club, Rubik's Cube club, computer games club, library makerspace club, which she has done differently this year. She's calling it workshops, and kids sign up for the workshops, and they really, like, they've worked on 3D pens. I saw them making witches hats on little mini pumpkins. They were very cool. We also have had CSL club going and foreign language club going. CSL is currently in Pink Fridays supporting Breast Cancer Month, and previous to that in September we did Gold Fridays for childhood cancer. And they have a bunch of projects that are going to be coming up, and I think one of the things that they want to do in November is a movie night. And that's it. Any questions?
On the calendar prizes, what's the value range, and what
Yeah,
sort of
what's an
things are you
idea,
looking
what kind of
for,
stuff?
and how do
So,
people let you know what they can
So
do?
I sent out an email to the parents, and I've gotten a couple email responses back. Anything from, you know, $50 to $200, gift baskets. One of the parents had said she would help me out with that too. So, and PTO is willing to also help me out with maybe going and getting some gift cards from local businesses and putting those on the calendar.
Great.
I'm happy to hear that you've got elementary students coming up to see STEM. I'm happy to hear that we're doing things between schools, and I hope there are opportunities where the classes and the project in Denise's school have opportunities for kids in the middle school to go down and see what these folks are doing and have discussion that way. So
It's always really, when you tell an older kid that you're going to go down to see a younger kid, they become this whole different person, and they're really, really great with the little kids. So we just need to invest a little more time and energy into figuring out how we can get our kids down there.
And if there's opportunities to go the other way,
Yep,
that's great too,
absolutely.
so.
Yep.
Terrific.
Anything else?
That's
Okay, I
great.
guess I'm
No,
going
that's
to
great.
be the controller. Slideshow.
I get the short seat.
And then
Yeah, that was awful.
next item on the agenda is the
New
new
chairs.
school and district report card.
It's new chairs, that's a division committee for us.
Yes, yes, new chairs. Awful.
So this is gonna be kind of a, I'll take the lead, but Mr. Goyette will chime in through this process. So,
I'll kick them.
well, there's a good, yeah, you won't have to kick me through the wood there. You can tell that Jerry and I have now worked together for 9 years, so, and it's great to have a partner like Jerry here to help me out. The state has come up with a new report card. Now, prior to, so Ed Reform in 1993 established the MCAS test, and that was in place for many, many years. But in 2017, they established the baseline for the new report card. So you just gotta bear with us. We'll take you through the whole presentation, and then if you have questions at the end, because it's a little bit, it's kind of all over the place. So I'd just like to start out. So this is the first year of this accountability system. Because it's all new, we have a new test. They're gonna tweak this, and I would say over the next 3 or 4 years, we're gonna have to let this all work its way out and go through the bugs of this system. You know, we still have some schools using paper and pencil for some of these tests, and other schools are online, so there's a discrepancy in the results. So just be patient. We did very, very well on our first report card, and I almost think that's a curse, because I think that once you do well, it's hard to maintain that. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go through it. Move on. So overall this year, 74% of schools were designated as not requiring assistance or intervention. We are in that bucket as well. 90% of districts are not requiring assistance, and we are in that bucket as well. You know, I think what the state is looking at is, you know, let's not start putting too many people in the bucket of needing assistance until we sort out what this report card means. 31% of all schools are meeting target. Our middle and high school are meeting target, and our elementary school is partially meeting their target. And you can see that the majority of schools come into that category.
And this replaces the level 1 schools, the level 2 schools, the level 3, 4, and 5s. They've really taken that off the table and made it into meeting, partially meeting, and in need of.
And what they did before was, if one school was a level 2 school in your district, the entire district was a level 2. That's no longer the case. As far as districts go, only 17% of categories are in the meeting the target range, and Sutton is in that category. As a matter of fact, we're in the top 10% of districts this year. And I caution you, this year. Very easy the next year to have a very different report card. And so you can see that the vast majority are meeting target or partially meeting target. So what you can't do is you can't compare 18 data to historical accountability results, and you can't equate 18 accountability categories with historical. There was no crossover. This is a whole new system, and it's going to take some time for all of us to get used to. They didn't roll this out to all the superintendents until September. So that's when the vast majority, other than the superintendents on the committees, that we got these results on how they'd roll this out to us. Oh, that's not a good-looking slide, is it? So that's our report card. So I can't see that from here, so I'm going to look at mine. Boy, there's a lot of information on that slide. So if you look at the far left, you have achievement, growth, high school completion, progress toward attaining English language proficiency, and additional indicators. So before, everything was based on achievement. Now they have all of these other categories. The group on the left side are grades 3 to 5, and the data on the right, 3 to 8, I'm sorry, 3 to 8, and the data on the right is high school. That's just not a good slide for people to see on TV, and I can't imagine it's good for you guys to see in the audience. So if you look, grades 3 to 5, in the middle column it says
3 to 8.
3 to 8, thank you, Jerry. 3 to 8, the weighted percentage, 67% of the grading is the test itself, the achievement. 22.5% of the weight is growth, how kids grew from one year to the next. And 10% is for grades 3 to 8 is chronic absenteeism, where we receive no points, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. In the high school, oh, I'm sorry, let me take that back. There's one other thing. They identify lowest performing students in grades 3 to 8 and lowest performing students in the high school. Lowest performing student category is the bottom 25% of our students and how they performed on the previous year. So they're comparing how the bottom quartile does from one year to the next. So we did very, very well in that area. And if you look at achievement, we did exceptionally well with achievement, with growth. The one area that you're going to notice that we received no points was chronic absenteeism. And that was the thing that really stood out to all the administrators, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So our overall report card score was an 81. And so when I first saw that, I mean, all of us that are my age or around my age, we automatically said it's a B minus. But that's really not what it represents. But that's what I thought of. So I'm like, I wonder how that
I
compares.
tried that on my parents. That doesn't work.
So I was really kind of surprised at how well our grade was compared to other area districts. Our actual report card for a K-12 school was the #1 score in central Massachusetts. Hopkinton was a little bit higher. I don't consider them in central Massachusetts. If they are, I didn't consider them. But I'm talking about this in the entire area. But let me give you an example. It's very, very misleading, though, because they set targets for improvement. So you could have very low-performing school districts that met their target for improvement, but their score, most of the kids are performing very poorly. And so it's something that we have to get used to. And I'm curious to see what happens next year, what happens to our score, because if you think about it, next year the high school has a new test. There are all new students taking that test. And if you have 100 kids taking a test, and so this year, what I say, 97, 98% of our kids were advanced and proficient in both ELA and math. Well, next year, if 10 kids don't do quite as well, our percentage goes down to 90%, and our score will drop. You're not going to get those 4s and those 3s. You're going to get 1s and 2s.
Also in science, this is the last year that they're testing the old standards. The following year is when we're going to be testing the new generation standards in science. So it's going to be a little different too.
I'll move here. If you look at the high school, I just want to point out that for all students in the high school, the scoring, the weight of the scoring is different. So, like I said, in the grades 3 through 8, achievement counted for 67.5% of the weight, but in the high school, it's only 47.5%. 22.5% for growth. Then they weigh 20% for four-year cohort graduation rate, which we receive no points for. And that again is a percentile, and we'll show you that as well. Extended engagement, which means how many kids who don't graduate in that 4-year window but continue on and graduate in 5 years. We got 3 out of 4 points there. And the annual dropout rate, we got 4 points there. But again, if you go down, the other 10% is chronic absenteeism and advanced coursework where we get 2 out of 4 points, and we'll explain that as we go through this presentation a little bit longer. All right. So this is the detailed indicator. So at the top is English Language Arts for grades 3 through 8. And so they set the target. For all students, our overall achievement in 2017 was a 502.6. They set our goal, our target goal of 504.4. But we grew to 506 total points. We exceeded our target and we got 4 points.
Got a question for you.
Yes.
The 504.4.
Yep. That
Preparing
would
us-
be the average of students together, what their score was. And the new scores are 530 to 560 is exceeding. 500 to 529 is meeting expectations. 470 and 499 is partially meeting expectations. And then anything below 469 is not meeting expectations. So when you look at this, our achievement was 502. That's at the low end of meeting standards. And then the 482 is the high end of the partial meeting standards. So it just is a nice barometer of, okay, where are the kids average-wise? Where are they?
And then if you look
Does that help, Kristen?
You
No.
don't want to hear what I have
Okay.
to say about
well,
that.
it's just
But, so 2017, we're looking, say, for instance, at kids who are in 3rd grade. 2018, are we looking at those 3rd graders who are now 4th graders, or are we looking at new set of 3rd graders?
It's the average of, right now, this cohort of grades 3 through 8.
it's all of them.
All of them put
All
together.
of them put together.
Okay, so then but then
But
for
it
the
sounds
two.
like one grade could shift out of that group.
Yeah, so
Yes.
what we're saying is we're shifting out, so we're not looking at apples to apples.
New.
And we're not looking at student progress as much
No.
as we're looking at teacher progress.
District progress.
District, but, all
That's
right,
what the growth part of the equation is. So this is achievement, the next is, and then that's 67.5% of the score. Then you look at growth. I'm glad you pointed it. See, again,
I just don't want
to-
everybody to get lost in
Well,
the
you-
numbers,
well,
because
should.
education's
This is very confusing, because if you look at the next scores, they're the old system. So they've changed everything. And we live it and we're confused. But let me just say this. The point for me of this test, and it's what I've said since I got here, we don't have to worry about the test. All of our kids pass. The value of this test is for the educators. It's for us to look at how we're doing. We get every question, how each kid answers it. We get the test results by teacher. So we can talk to teachers and say, let's look at what you, so that to me is the value of this.
right, really what it's indirectly doing is testing our educators. Yes,
Well, they're testing both.
okay, but I mean, the only constant here is the educator, because the kids change from year to year,
For the achievement piece.
so,
I've
okay.
always believed that the most important statistic from any of these tests is the growth from year to year of the
Absolutely.
individual student.
Absolutely.
That tells us, are we moving kids along as they go through our school system? And I think Nate and Paul and Kristen, since you've been on the committee since I've been here, that's always been the pattern. Our kids get better and better and better as they go through the school system. But you're right, this is very confusing. We went from, 200 to 220 was not meeting, and 220 to 240, that was the old system. 240 to 260 and 260 to 280 were the 4 categories for MCAS. Now it's
It's a pretty broad sample over 6 grades. It's not one grade, so you got one
Right.
shifting in, one shifting out. But it's a pretty broad sample over 6 grades. And without knowing a lot about it, going from 502 to 506 is the right direction, but not dramatic. But I was just trying to read the numbers, got a little better, not out of the park, like, oh my gosh, how are these different?
right. And again, they're changing curriculum. We're trying to understand how the test is delivered. It's a different kind of test. They're now, think about it. putting 8-year-olds on a computer and taking this test. So we need to keep all of this in perspective. And I wouldn't jump to any great conclusions about any of this yet, other than we have to get used to this new system. But it is very, very confusing. I've provided the committee with each school's report card, an individual report card, but I wanted to take you through kind of a bigger viewpoint. If you go down to the bottom of that square, that's the high school. And again, they break it out, all students and lowest performing students. They have other categories, but those are the only categories that we actually have in our district that create subgroups. And again, as I said earlier, our MCAS scores in our high school this year were off the charts. And, you know, if you have an average class of 100 kids, that fluctuates from one year to the next, so I don't want to overplay that. If you go to the next one, which is mathematics, is that math now?
Yep.
Again, all students in grades 3 through 8, we improved but just below the target. However, our lowest performing students exceeded their target. So,
So
again,
what is the difference then of 0.7? What does that really represent?
0.7.
Well, the difference between the achievement that we had versus the achievement that was the target.
They set a target. And so that's what they're saying, that they'd like to see us, how they set that target?
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure.
If they just
Okay.
throw,
I'm not,
sorry.
That would be interesting to find out is
Yep.
what's the
yeah,
criteria for
what-
setting the target?
Yeah, how are we getting there?
sure there's a percentage and a formula, obviously, that they use.
Well, how did they arrive at that, and how does that make sense, and how does that truly make sense in this model?
Well, what makes sense is they look and they're looking for growth and improvement. So, you know, to go from 500 to 501.5, you know, I think what they're setting is some realistic targets to get to. How they did that, I'm not exactly sure what the matrix was that they used to get us to these targets. And hopefully, as we go through this, and we go to more webinars, the webinars that Jerry and I did, they didn't get into the details of how they came up with these targets. So again, I think, to be honest, the state's moving very quickly, and they're kind of, I don't want to say they're making some things up as they go along, but they put a very ambitious time frame on this, and they're trying to take an old test and a new test and reconfigure how they create report cards, and there's going to be some tweaking coming forward. Again, if you look at the high school, you know, we exceeded target in mathematics. Yes.
What I struggle with in this is without, and again, this isn't this is the state, is what I struggle with is without knowing how targets are set, this seems to me that there are people in Boston just trying to set up a program that continues to say that our test scores are better than everybody else's test scores without providing any substance behind it to explain how this works. Now, I'm happy to see the improvement, but I look at these results and I say, without the state telling me what any of this stuff means and what it's based on and how it's, you know, how it was developed,
It's kind of, I won't use that
the
word,
numbers are
sorry.
nice. Yay, yes, we were number one in Central Mass, but number one based on what?
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, they take each, it's an interesting new way to report out a report
Oh,
card.
it'd be lovely to have one of them come here and sit and tell me what this really means.
Yeah.
Well,
Massachusetts needs to.
I think it means you take a test, you calculate the achievement data based on how our kids performed, based on the baseline that was established in 2017. And if you want to get a better score, your scores need to go up as a collective. All the kids' scores need to go up. They look at lowest performing students and they say, this was what your baseline was in 17. we expect your school district, how they say establish, I don't know, but you gotta get to here to get anywhere from
Right.
0 to 4 points. That's the system. I think as we go along and we all understand it a little bit better, that will make more sense to us.
Right,
Am
but
I
we-
misreading it in that the scores, just on that top line, the 499.8 and the 500.8, those are averages of the MCAS scores that we've seen for that particular group?
Correct.
So those numbers haven't changed. It's the MCAS scores. I appreciate we've talked about has MCAS changed, but on what we're looking at, the 499.8 and the 508 are MCAS scores that we've talked about for years. It's the how did you set a target of what you'd like to see growth-wise that you're concerned about how they calculate.
Well.
Yeah, how and
the-
why?
Well,
It's the how and why, and I think for everybody in the state, I think it's different. They calculate it differently based on, when you look at other schools' scores, it's really hard to figure out, well, how come our change, they were only looking for like 2.3, but other schools, they were looking for like 2.6.
Well, and we all hated AYP, which was a different way of saying you're gonna have the score and we'd like to see growth.
Right.
So here we got a new one that says you got a score and we'd like to see growth.
here's the added kink in this. The scores before ranged from 200 to 280. Now they range from
400,
Yeah.
400 to
from 440 to 560.
to 400. And so we all, over the last 12 years or 15 years, were used to looking at scores in the range of 200 to 280. Now they're telling us why they changed that, I don't know. I think we were all pretty accustomed to that. I don't know the rationale and why they did
But
that.
shouldn't they be communicating this?
When
If,
this was communicated.
hello? I mean,
was-
this isn't rocket science. I mean, this is where I get frustrated, because
This
you're
was-
expecting us to jump through hoops, but you can't explain.
This, parts of it were communicated. This new report card was rolled out to us in September.
Parts.
So it wasn't, we're just getting how they figured this. They're really trying to push out some of the stuff, and there's not a lot of people.
Can't get buy-in if you don't have people who understand what you're telling them. This isn't,
But the good thing is, we're getting an introduction to what's coming and what we'll see, so.
This is the
Getting
first,
there.
this is
And
the.
then
Sorry,
we
I'm
should
just-
get more information so we can translate what
if
we're
any of
seeing.
those people are out there watching, I'd love to have a conversation with them.
We,
This is,
we debated how many charts to give you all at once here.
No, give us
Because
credit.
we've
I'll
gone through
talk
this
first.
now several times, and we're just trying to get our heads around it and understand it and what it all means. In the end, the bottom line is, we're taking a new test, and by and large, our kids grew from last year's baseline to this year in most categories. So we've done well moving the needle in the right direction.
And they're asking you to focus on the bottom 25%. If you
And
want to
the
look at this year over year, which I think fits in a little bit with the, don't worry about it, we're doing just fine with the MCAS with passing, and to say, don't worry about trying to get up to top, worry about the kids who you don't have that baseline covered.
For our district, though, because our district, you have to have a cohort of 20 kids to
Yeah.
be considered in a category. So there are other districts out there that have
Got it.
way more kids than us, so their chart might be all full. They might have, scores filling in all over the place. We're just fortunate to have, or
Right.
unfortunate to have,
If you don't have a copy of this and you're sitting at home, can't see the screen, you're saying the first two rows were all students and the next one was that lowest performing. But then we didn't get scores for high needs, economic disadvantage,
Correct.
English language, a whole host of different types of grouping that you didn't have sufficient count in.
because you need at least 20 students.
Got it.
so I got one more question.
Yes.
So who picks where people fit within here? I understand some categories, but there are other categories I'm looking at up there that, I mean, obviously, they're not pertaining to us, but they are because there's some categories that should be full that are not.
Like what?
Well, I'm-
Economically disadvantaged?
No, well, I'm looking at this, so we've labeled people white. So on my thing, on my list, I'd check off multi-race. So then that means you've gotta have 25 to fully fit into that category.
20%.
All right, so then they never show up.
We don't have 20% in Sutton. You don't have 20% of our students who are economically disadvantaged. We don't have 20%
Well,
of
like,
our students who are ELL students.
okay, but
These are
like,
the only categories that fit the criteria.
right, but what
to
I'm
be
saying is
measured.
like, I can't be the only one that would check off something like the multi-race, non-Hispanic, because that's what I am. I'm
But
multi-ethnicity.
we didn't get the 20%.
So,
it
so,
doesn't count.
so they don't count, so
Don't count.
anybody within those categories doesn't
You
get
would count
counted.
in the all-student category.
Okay,
They don't, unless
so
you have 20%.
they don't get broken out.
We don't
Okay.
break it out.
Interesting.
So this is the achievement piece. If we go, let's just go to the next one.
Science.
I would just keep going.
Sorry, I'm
Unless you
just
want
gonna,
to see the science. I just want to go, so that's the achievement piece. Let's go to the student growth. Are you on student growth? Right here. So if you look at these charts, this is just talking about mean growth. So in other words, all students in 2018, how much did they grow compared to the previous year? And so if the mean is 50, so all students in grades 3 through 8, comparing 17 to 18, grew at 54.6% in ELA. And lowest performing students grew at 54.7. So
It was a raw number, not percentage, right?
yeah, where's this,
It's 54 point.
that's what,
0.7,
points versus percent, I mean.
Sorry, you said 54.6%, which would be an
Yeah,
off the charts
Try-
kind of growth. You'd be well beyond the 560.
I'm confused.
I think that first row, all students, 2018 mean, is, the mean growth was 54.6 points.
Yes. 54.6 what?
Points.
Points.
Right,
Not percentage.
Yes.
percentage.
And so the target was 50%. So if you got between 50 and 60, you met target. If you got above 60, you exceed target. If you get below 50 is how that worked. So if you look at the one below it, we met target, the mean student growth student growth percentile.
Right.
If you look at that in the high school, so here again, so the high school was 52.5%, and the lowest performing was 48.6%, below the target. Yet we just showed you our test scores in ELA, and 97, 98% exceeded, or in advanced and proficient. But that doesn't tell the whole story, right? So you can have kids who were in advanced and proficient in 8th grade when they took the test, but their growth wasn't as much as, so that's why, to me, the growth is the single most important measurement we should look at. Let me take that back. If our scores are terrible, then we have to look at our curriculum and how we're delivering instruction. But if you take that out, we want to see how kids are improving from year to year. So these statistics here, that counts for 22.5% of the overall report card in grades 3 through high school.
As they stabilize the tests, the growth is, I'm suspicious, going to be more susceptible to wild swings than even the raw score.
Right.
They can, because they can normalize that to some extent, but your growth I would guess over a few years, this is gonna be hard to watch.
So they said that this year the baseline was 50, and I'm assuming that next year our baseline is either going to be the average of those two scores, or that is going to be our baseline for next year.
But just the exams themselves, where they're still stabilizing that,
Mhm.
I think you're gonna find that the growth is more susceptible to wild swings, so that, as you were warning before, next year you could get a far worse growth than you'd like. That there'll be an element that I suspect will look pretty random there.
So I obviously did a lot of comparing, and looking at what other school scores, and, you know, there were some really high-performing school districts with report cards of 35, and it's because of how they're measuring. If all your kids are advanced and proficient, to get to that next level, I mean, I saw one school that was 99% advanced and proficient, so their target was 98% advanced, 99.8% advanced and proficient. Well, you know, they got no points for growth in mathematics because from the previous year, the kids performed at 92%.
So I would ask you, what was wrong with AYP?
Well, right. I mean, so, and it's kind of difficult. We'll hear the superintendent, middle school principal. We're trying to make sense of this and trying our best to make sense for you. I think it's just gonna be one of these things where it's gonna take several years for us to sort through and find the value in this. But I can tell you that I've met with each principal, we've gone through each test, we've gone through all the teachers and how their kids performed, and looking at what we can do differently to make sure that our instruction and our curriculum, to a degree, lines up. You know, I don't want to, this is what I don't like about this type of test. Well, we didn't do well, so we can't do STEM week, because STEM week doesn't line up with the curriculum. Well, that's crazy. We don't want to develop a system like that. So that's why we don't want to overplay the value of one single exam.
So this is good in saying too, if we're doing well as we are, what can we do to engage the kids more? Because engaging the children more will enable them to have a more rich environment in which to learn. So now it's looking at different teaching methods.
Well, that's what we're doing. I mean, that's what the vision committee was,
Right.
what we're talking
Right,
about.
that's what I'm saying. I mean, you can tie this all in, and ultimately that's where you need to go, because you use all your senses to learn. So why not do projects? Why not, all these great things that we're starting,
That's why you don't teach to the test.
absolutely.
So 4-year cohort graduation rate, again, 100 students arrive in our high school. At the end of that 4 years, 94% graduated on time with their class. They set a target of 96.7. We went from 94.7 to 94. That's one student. So think about it in this terms. If we had 3 students graduate with that group, we would receive all the points. So again, we have a very low dropout rate. Then the next target is extended. So the students that may need an extra year, we got 3 out of 4 points. So it went from 96% over a 5-year cohort, and we went up to 97.3%. But we do have students that might have special needs issues that take a little bit longer. And we do have a small percentage, I think it's 0.7%, that dropped out of school last year. That's another one of these charts. So that's another way you get points. Annual dropout rate is the next slide. And you can see that in 2016, we had an annual dropout rate of 1.1% out of 426 students. In 2007, it dropped to 0.7%. So it went down, so we exceeded there. I want to get
But
to...
isn't that still a problem if we've got a dropout rate?
As an educator, I don't want any student to drop out of school.
Yeah, so,
I don't.
yeah, okay.
We do have some students that, and, you know, that's another conversation for another day. But we do a lot of work with students that are in that predicament. We've had a number of students in the last year that got their GEDs. We worked with, there's an organization, I forget the program that we send kids to, so they get the GED. As a superintendent, it's hard for me to say this, but there are some kids that school is just not what, they're just, and it breaks my heart because I meet with them all. But it's just, they can't do it. They just, by the way, they're more than capable of doing it for whatever reason, what's ever getting in the way. So we work with them. We try to keep them in school. We find other avenues in which to allow them to succeed. We got a couple of different letters from parents this year. Dan DeLongchamp received them. I got CC'd on them, thanking us for getting their child through their GED. But it's more what the work we're doing in the Vision Committee about how do we engage kids in different ways that keep them invested in their education. And that work is very, very important. I want to get to chronic absenteeism because this also ties to the Vision Committee, because one of the big things that came out of the Vision Committee is mental health services, financial well-being, nutrition, and what we're finding is that when I look at attendance, we average students in every building, over 95% of the kids attend school daily. Staff is about 96, 97% on average. Actually, staff might be higher than that. So to be chronically absent, you have to miss 18 school days. So in 2017, 2.7% of kids in grades 3 through 8 missed 18 or more school days. And it's not because they went to Disney World in November. That's not why this is the way it is. But in 2018, went to 4.9%. That's a big number. That's a lot of kids. Now, part of it is when kids are going out and we provide tutoring services, we didn't claim those tutoring services, and you can, which will offset some of those days, but we didn't do that. And we also don't start them until day 10 if they're out.
But this still represents an issue. If you look at your lowest performing students, they're the ones who have the a pretty significant increase in the absentee.
I would say all of them.
Right, no, they're all, but if you look at the spread between, with the lowest performing, you've got them up almost 4.5% and 7%.
So Kristen, one of the things that we learned through this webinar thing, so the numbers would be a little bit lower because we did have a lot of kids on medical this year, and we weren't counting them. They didn't tell us that we could count them.
And I'm not blaming you, but I'm just saying that,
Right.
that just goes again to all of what we're doing within the Vision Committee, which is, here's where I think some of the stuff is useful, is just in pointing out something we haven't looked at before.
Right.
So how are we missing these children? How are we missing providing services that are appropriate to keep them in school? You know, for some kids, maybe it might be a chronic illness where they've got a significant, but for the mental health issues, those are huge. And if we don't catch them now, you're going to have something that could be a lifelong debilitating issue, and that's huge. So bandwagon.
Mr. Friend pulled us all in. We did our reports of who was absent over that amount of time, and every single one of them, I could tell you exactly why they were absent that far, and the majority of them were because mental health. And those kids also receive a lot of support within our school system, and it's still, mental health is such a barrier for a lot of the kids on that list to come to school. The other part was, though, the whole, we didn't know the rule of if you provide 3 hours of tutoring, that counts for a day. So the number would have been a little bit lower because we did have some kids who were out because of medical for,
But it still
But-
makes you look at the number and say, why have we got this and what
that
can
was
we
the
do?
eye-opener for us, was just, wow, mental health is
Yeah.
really,
It's huge.
really doing a number on our school, and we need to figure out why.
It's an alarming number.
Yes, that's what I'm
And-
trying to say here. It's
You know, right away, we have a system in the high school, they meet every week, it's called the SAM meeting. They have a system in the middle school. We have robust programming in the elementary school, but we didn't have SAM meetings, so now we're having meetings every 2 weeks in grades K to 5 with our 2 guidance counselors, our school psychologists, the principals, the school resource officer, because that was a missing piece. The problems begin when they're young, and we have to be on this at a very young age. But it just kind of went under the radar because we were paying attention to it, but when you look at its totality, I'm sorry, 4.9% of our kids missed 18 days or more. That's a staggering number. That means everybody else comes all the time because our percentage is very high. So that's, to me, that was the best thing that came out of this report. And I think having a vision committee and a district learning team, it's our think tank to look at this and say, okay, what are we missing here? What changes can we make in our system so that kids aren't feeling anxious? You know, the idea that when I came here, there was only one recess in our early learning center. To think that kids are gonna sit and then, oh, but we did a snack, but it was an indoor snack, it was a quiet indoor snack. What? We were talking today, you know, our middle school, and this is something Jerry and I were talking about, they get a 22-minute lunch. And Jerry said, yeah, but they get 3 minutes of passing
No,
time.
no, 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 no.
Passing time after. And I'm like, oh,
I
they
also
get
said-
28 minutes for lunch.
Yeah, we've had lunch a little bit.
And I joked when I said, you know, who would work in this environment? And then all the teachers said, well, we work in this environment,
Yep.
and we get a 22-minute lunch. We need to look at how we're delivering, but this put a spotlight on how the pressure from all different
Yeah,
places.
but as you just mentioned, there's pressure to have lunch. I gotta get down there because if I wanna eat, and if I have to stand in line,
There's pressure in society, there's
I may not eat.
pressure on homework, there's pressure. So,
On the flip side, Kristen, I will tell you, the quality of lunch has gotten better and
oh,
better.
yeah, oh, no.
And I will tell you, that has increased the line.
Yeah.
So we've been keeping an eye on that.
So quality of food is good, that's
Yeah.
good. But we just need to figure out how to balance it, because again, it's that rushed,
Yep.
they need a,
Yep.
we need a
we're
Zen
gonna
moment
leave it
here.
here. We'll leave it here. Any questions, about anything?
I'm encouraged that the state has put together, or is trying to pull together a report card that is not solely the MCAS score. There's,
Yes.
I think that's a huge positive, and as they sort out what a target is or how it's calculated or where it looks like, it'll become more valuable potentially to read. But there's, for teams who've just been up and down about the MCAS score doesn't say everything, they're trying to bring in some other factors.
And, yeah, I think they're on the right track. I mean, it took, MCAS took probably 8 or 10 years before it really became a valuable tool for us to use. It's gonna take 3 or 4, because they've already got a jump on it, but it's gonna take 3 or 4 years before this becomes a really valuable tool. Just one other thing, go to that last slide. I just gotta show you. The advanced coursework, so this is, in order to be added to this list, 77.7% of our students scored a passing score on an AP exam. So it's based on getting a passing score. And so they set a target of from 77.7 to 82.3. How, I don't know. There's probably a percentage there that makes sense. But if you remember, the reason we get the MIMSI grant was we're not worried about the passing score. The statistics are kids who take at least one AP course and don't pass it are better prepared for college work when they got college. So again, we get 2 out of 4. I'm not going to pressure, kids will take the test and what comes of it will come of it. I'm not going to worry about that. But but pretty good statistic. 80% of our kids are taking at least one AP course and are getting a passing score. It's a pretty good statistic. All right, thank you.
Got a quick question. Do we know what is the absentee rate high during MCAS time?
No.
So is there a run before or after the exam?
I haven't delved into that too deeply.
I would say when we look at the students on our list of kids, it really was dependent on each student
Okay.
and the patterns that those kids
Okay,
had.
because the test, I'm sure, is a stress-inducing subject for some, but whether it's going to keep them out of school is a whole other thing. But it just goes to the fact that we just need to look at how we handle all of this and how do we bring the kids into all of this, and do we work with them prior to something that's perhaps stressful in order to help them be able to handle that.
I think it's the band kids who are taking a couple of days off to get on to their.
I think it really comes back down to just looking at the individual kids and what they're going through in their worlds,
Right.
and how to best support them as they come. What's good is they overshare when they come in.
Yep.
But sometimes it takes 3 days of them at home before they can come in and then overshare. And then once they've overshared and they've gotten some suggestions and strategies, then it takes them a couple days to work through that in their own space before they can put it into practice and come back
Right.
to school.
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that process for the individual student, I think the masses would also benefit from.
Right.
Again, it's how to handle that, because again, that goes to that whole life skills thing that we were talking about. Being able to handle it now is going to arm you far better to deal with the real world when you get out there. If you learn mastery of the skills, not everybody's going to learn it, and there will be people who have chronic issues throughout, but if you at least provide the basic skills, you've got something to build on. So
I think it will get better because, as we were doing SAMs in the middle school and we're doing SAMs in the high school, the missing link was the Early Learning Center in elementary school, because those
That's where-
problems weren't going away, but they weren't really talking about them as a
Right.
collective.
They
to
were
see.
taught, please,
They
we
were talking.
knew every child.
Child,
And we're a small place. We know every child that's having difficulties. It's the collective and the thinking and the strategizing about how to help each individual child is the benefit of the SAMS meeting. I do want to say one thing to what you just mentioned about the pressure of the test. I downplay the test, and one of the big reasons why I downplay the test is that I don't want to put added pressure on the educators, who then put the added pressure on the students that the superintendent expects our scores to go up by this amount. I want them to do well, but I want them to be relaxed and comfortable and take a test, and
It's
what
go
comes
out,
of
do-
it, what
do your
comes
best,
of it,
absolutely.
and that's it.
And you're right, that's a consistent message, but it's just, there are children who get worked up. The little kids taking this test, really, there are better things for them to be doing.
But don't,
And I think it's important that the committee on a consistent basis with MCAS scores is asking, are you using the data to improve? Not as interested as what was the score, but do you have the tools you need, the time, and are you using the data? And I think that's still there, but the state has entered new factors into the equation, and it maybe drives conversations at the administration around what are things that we can be doing here, right? The absenteeism rate, when you see that number and you say, okay, are we really doing the things that we can do to help that? So.
it made us think differently.
Yep.
It was good. Thank you, Jerry.
Sorry, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Next item is to approve disposal of surplus property.
So, as you all know, we got a grant from the state from the E-rate, and the town kicked in, I want to say $75,000. So this is our old Aruba wireless, all of that equipment. We don't use it anymore. We have a brand-new system, so I just need you to approve it so they can place it on municipal bid and see if they can't get a few dollars for it.
6 or 7 years old.
I move to approve the disposal of surplus property as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next item is the third reading and adoption of policies. So these are the meal charging policy. Meal charging policy. Student submission to educational surveys and research policy, and the parental notification relative to sex education policy. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to adopt the policies EFD, ILD, and IHAMA as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
Let's go with the red lines in there, if people want to see what the red lines were.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, passes 5-0.
Did I give you a copy, Mr. Edwards, for the disposal?
Yes, right here,
Okay, and for the field trip as well?
right here.
Awesome, thank you.
Next item is the superintendent's update.
Okay. I have a lot, so I'll pare a little bit of it back for you, but I am on the DESI board that is going to look at alternative schedules. Was once called the Blizzard Bag. And so I met in Malden last week with several superintendents from around the state, several that have implemented this program. And the reason why this committee was formed was because DESI was getting complaints from a number of constituents around whether they think that having students on a snow day doing work at home is equivalent to being in school. And so they want to bring everybody together to work out any of the bugs associated with this. But what I will tell you is the town of Sutton is light years away from being able to implement a program like this. The town of Wakefield and Melrose and Burlington were 3 towns that were involved in this. The amount of time and effort, I mean, obviously we would look at what they did and build off of their work, but the amount of work and the amount of effort that they put in would take a long time for us to replicate here in town. But obviously there are issues with special education students, compensatory services for students that have OT-PT speech. There are issues with parents that have to work and who's going to help the child. So one school, for instance, grades 1 and 2, the amount of time that students had to work in grades 1 and 2 with their parents was 1 hour. And so I would imagine that there are a lot of parents saying, how does 1 hour of work at home with mom and dad equate to a full day of school? But these school districts are very, very progressive, and these superintendents are pretty talented folks. And they have a very sophisticated system, and it was very, very impressive. But they viewed it in a different light. It wasn't called Blizzard Bag. It was really, learning takes place everywhere. And so kids need to learn to do schoolwork outside of school. And what they're really working toward is probably what the future of education is. At some point, our high school students, in 10 years from now, a high school student's going to go to school 5 days a week. There's some question about that. You know, with technology and blended learning and different ways to do it, or maybe they come to school, but they just take classes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Tuesdays and Thursdays are a different model of how we deliver instruction. So they're taking this opportunity to explore those avenues as much as the idea of kids staying home. I'm not convinced that doing this is the most effective way to do it.
Ted, how many days of school were missed last year by power outages, snowstorms, clogged toilets?
I want to say it was 8 days, but it was a significant number. Some schools, and that was kind of my point.
Yeah.
Are we going to put this much effort in, this much professional development, this much? They talked about, what do you do with all the instructional assistants? What do they do on those snow days? And how does that equal a full day of work? So I think a lot of people, and what's interesting is, I had a meeting with the Blackstone Valley superintendents on Friday, and the superintendent from Hopedale lives in another town toward Boston, and she's with a parent group, and they're talking about this. And she said, if you saw all the comments by parents, there's real concern about making this really equal a day of school. The last thing in the world you want to do is just try to wing this. You really have to have your ducks in a row to make it effective. But I want to be on this committee because I want to hear more about how Wakefield and Melrose and Burlington roll this out. So I'll give you a difference also. Melrose, they don't do paper anymore. Everything is Google Docs. And so for a high school
$16,000 in
and a
paper.
middle school student, you can communicate back and forth with your teacher from home, and you do all your work through Google Docs. You can have, a regular school day. 4th grade, 3rd grade, parents have to work. How does that all work? So, some other positive things happened. Neighborhoods got together. So Johnny's parents are, doctors in Boston, and they're not going to be home, so neighborhoods got together and did it. But it's interesting. I'll be on the committee. We're going to meet again in November. We're going to probably meet this entire year. The state is going to form guidelines, and it's something maybe down the road we might pursue, but I don't see us pursuing it anytime soon. I mentioned to you at 2 prior meetings there was some mold in the elementary school at the start of the year. Does everybody remember that? Mm-hmm. So one classroom is still displaced. There's a teacher that has severe allergy to mold. We've tried countless times to bring the teacher back. I met with a number of parents last week, very concerned. We've decided to make a permanent move and move that classroom into the Early Learning Center. And also tomorrow we have the state that's going to come out, the person who handles air quality and mold. They're going to do air quality tests. They're going to examine the building just to rule out if we actually have a problem. I want you to know that we've been proactive. We've replaced ceiling tiles that were wet. We've gone above the ceiling. I've gone above the ceiling. I've seen there were some spots on some pipes from the humidity and the air conditioning units. We've cleaned all of those, but I'm not a mold expert. Our attendance rate in those buildings in our schools has been greater than 98%. And so I think there might, I don't know how mold works. I don't know what allergies to mold are. We're bringing them in. I will say, though, that the state has told us there are no real guidelines and procedures with mold other than clean it up and get rid of it. So, but I just wanted the committee to know that we are looking at that, and we will test both the Early Learning Center and the elementary school.
So if we clean it up, cleaning up is one thing, getting rid of it or preventing it from coming back is another. So is that part of the plan?
Yes.
Because you're going to have some moisture removal system to take away that stuff because...
What we discovered was there were also a couple of exhaust fans that were not working. And so the AC was working, but you also have exhaust fans
So you're not having to pull it
So
in.
we're fixing those as we speak, so those are all being fixed as
So
well.
that might mitigate the issue. then.
It might. And if we have to, if they come in and they say, well, you have to remove some of the insulation around some of these pipes, we'll do that as well. But we've had the health inspector in half dozen times. We've had MPC come in and they do this work for us. I've looked up in the ceilings, Mr. Raymond has. So I believe we've been aggressive in dealing with it. But I think parents want the assurance of having the state come in and do a test, and we'll do that tomorrow. On another note, the 2 new boilers have been installed in the elementary school. One was fired up last week. They were in today firing up the second one. And so hopefully we'll see some savings there, but it's up and running. We have the heat on. The kindergarten parade, costume parade, is Thursday on Halloween. That's always, they go around the school. If I had my way, everybody would have, I mean, it's Halloween.
Yes.
You know, when you're 8 years old and it's Halloween, whether you're wearing the costume or not, their minds are thinking about trick-or-treating, so that's always great. November 1st is early action for the high school seniors. So what I liked from Mr. McCarthy's note was that he's asking the teachers to go a little lighter on homework and big assignments leading up to that date, so that those kids can focus on getting those out. I do also want to mention, and I mention all the time, I love the fact that in your junior year of high school, you do your college essay as your last writing assignment in your junior year. So that really helps the process for those kids. There was a blood drive at our high school on November 7th. On Saturday night, we had our first SEFT fundraiser of the year. You know, I saw at least 150 parents. There might have been more there. It was very, very successful. It went from 7 to 11. I left at 9 o'clock. I had a good time. But as superintendent, I can't be there having too good of a time. So I left. It was a lot of fun. It was great to see people out enjoying themselves. Also, the basketball, the rec basketball program, they want to redo the basketball courts outside and put in new hoops. So they've approached us. They've gotten prices to do it, approximately $26,000 to replace the courts themselves with new tar, new lines, new everything, and 4 new basketball hoops. The total cost is $26,000. The rec league, the youth rec can come up with $10,000, and the men's league can come up with $2,500. So they can cover half the cost. I'm going to get 3 quotes. I'm going to come back to the committee and make a recommendation to look at our summer sports revolving account and our building use revolving account as a way to do that, to upgrade those facilities, because we use them in the fall and in the spring with our students, and it's something that's worth looking at. I could wait another year and put it on the capital plan, but it just doesn't get done. I mean, it does get done, don't get me wrong. I mean, the capital plan's fabulous, but that would put that work out. They've been looking to do this for several years. It's in need of being done.
Could you package that with the sidewalks?
Yeah, where's, and see if somebody will come in and do it all.
See if there's
Yeah.
a little enticement for a little bigger
Yeah, it's a little
paycheck
bit
for
more.
somebody to come in?
It is really amazing, isn't it? I
Yeah.
just
That's
don't
just-
know where that is.
I mean,
crazy.
it's just one way to get both jobs done.
Yeah.
It's a little bigger job, too.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's a different work, though. The quote that she got was from this group that does tennis courts. So it's a different type of a job.
Those are asphalt, aren't they? Those courts?
Those are, yes.
That's probably 10 years ago. No longer than 10 years ago were those done.
Basketball courts?
Yeah.
It's even less than that.
Yeah, just.
The
I would say-
basketball
I
courts?
mean, tennis courts.
Oh, the
No,
tennis
tennis
courts,
courts,
they were
like
just
2
done.
years
The
ago.
basketball
2 years.
cats are, but I think they were done fairly recently,
Basketball
within the
courts,
last
not-
6 years or so.
No, not
No?
since I've been here.
Really?
No, I think it's been a while.
And how
Yeah,
time
tennis
is
courts are
creeping
tough.
up on me.
It is, yeah.
Maybe with the elementary school, around
That
that
might be it.
timeframe.
Back playground.
All right. I could go, I get all, I'm going to stop here.
Is there any new business?
I would agree with Ted that the SEFT fundraiser was really well attended and it was a good time. We thank you to Wormtown Brewery.
Yeah, great event.
And there was recently a second vision committee
Yes.
meeting. How did that go?
It went well. You know, I tentatively scheduled November 14th, but I've been getting together with the administrators, and it's almost like now we internally need to take some of this information and kind of organize it, and, because we do this for a living now. I think we get a lot of good guidance. But in meeting with Jerry and Ted today, we talked about, you know, we've thrown out ideas about, do we get an engineering program? But as you analyze what came out of the vision, it was more around health. It was more around nutrition. It was more around personal finance. It was more around those things. And so we've been tossing around the idea of, do we hire a health teacher that straddles the middle and the high school? And we start developing programs in that way, maybe leading toward kids who are interested in going into nursing or guidance or those types of things, as opposed to an engineering program.
We're losing a health teacher too, aren't
Well, yes, we are. That was, she teaches anatomy, she teaches a lot of health, she does a lot of that. But when you look at the surveys talked about the need for those services in the middle school. That was the number one thing that came out of the middle and high school. Health, nutrition, personal finance, kind of those regular living, everyday
It's
things.
it's your activities of daily living. And
So,
that's huge, yeah.
So the first vision meeting was great. You were at that, and it was a lot of ideas came out, which was excellent. The second meeting, there was still some new ideas presented, but it was more focused on, you know, how do we kind of, what track do we put these ideas in so that we can have a focus on how do we approach them? And I think we got a good start on that, but I think you might be right that it's probably time for the administration to try to look at some of this and then come back with some sort of, I guess, feasibility, if you will, of what do we think's kind of attainable, and that's when the vision committee could then reassess what we're looking at after the administration's had a chance to digest and recommend potentially. But I think this is gonna be an ongoing thing. We look at it as, you know, we've got this vision committee, we'll come up with these ideas for the next 5 years, but that's great, we're always gonna need this. We're gonna have to continue the vision committee. This first one's the big one, and then you just
Yeah.
continuous improvement.
And we met again as basically 4 different schools, and the idea was to try to find where is the common ground for the first implementation, find where the common ground is, where the high school and the early learning center actually have
Yeah.
something that
I mean,
crosses over.
but you see lots of common threads going through.
Yeah.
It's just different levels, and how do you address those based on the age group that you've got? So that's the important thing. I think that to me is the most important thing, is how do you make it vertical?
How do you make it vertical? And we met today. I'm gonna be meeting with Jerry and Dan and Ted this whole week. We live in boxes. We live in chunks of time. And what I got from the vision committee is we need more STEM weeks. We need more creative ways. What do we want our kids to know and be able to do when they leave 8th grade? And it's not in little chunks and boxes of time, carefully cut out, and we walk to the next class.
Right, and so this fits in nicely, I think, with our vision and mission, and one of them is, you know, to have an independent thinker. And that's huge. So you give them as many tools as possible in many different ways. You know, if we're teaching them constantly one way to learn, that's not gonna serve them well out there. So to have multiple modalities to be able to attack and address a problem, That's huge.
And it can't be the way we're currently
And,
doing it.
And it-
that plays into being able to make your way through the world. You need to, unfortunately, adapt, and if you don't adapt,
It may also play into the mental health part in that you're breaking up the routine, and if you were to incorporate something that is, whether it's an hour a week or it's one day a month where you're doing something completely different and not sitting in a classroom, perhaps that brings some kids back and has other kids more engaged.
and that's great. If you break out of the routine, you increase the plasticity of the brain, and that,
Mental health was
That's what we
something
want.
that was mentioned,
Yeah.
even at the Early Learning Center. Mental health was one of the topics. I know it was a big one in the elementary school, which surprised
It is,
yeah, and
surprised
early
me,
learning.
but,
Yeah.
yeah.
but I,
That's-
so it's not a simple, you know, and some schools are more prepared to make changes than others, because of just the age of the kids, the level of student, and change is difficult for people. We also have to put some numbers
Yeah,
and
mental health
price
for the
tags
teachers, too.
on things. So we can easily say that physical education can be covered if you play a sport. That would have to come to the school committee, and you would have to approve that that would be, so there's some things that we want to bring to you, but we need to take a little bit of time to digest this and kind of put our thoughts on it, and because what we want to do is at least do something next year.
Right.
We're not going to talk about these things and then do nothing. But we'd like it to lead to more changes down the road, so it's going to take some time to figure out how that all looks. So again, I might change the 14th. I also have a budget that we've got to get out. I'm also going to recommend that we probably push the time out just a bit on the budget subcommittees.
You can't push out when it's
Too
due.
long.
Too-
It's due the
yeah.
26th.
You can't go
Push
too
out
far.
when it's due.
January is, we have to have a public hearing, January 25th or whatever that is. But we're talking about how do we want to present this to you and to the town? Because I do believe, for instance, that we're probably going to say not hire a middle school special education teacher, but hire a reading specialist in the lower grades. It's not an increase in personnel, it's just shifting in resources. I think that's going to happen, but we'd have to hire an instructional aide to cover special needs kids. So we're going to have to explain this also. I might come to you and say, I need the second week in December to have our first meeting, and maybe something different. Maybe we'll be ready, and I'll share it as we're moving along.
Particularly if it's got unique or different changes that might require more time for us to get our head wrapped around. Starting later with something new with a deadline is tough.
Stress, mental health, yes.
You know, I can probably bring it out in pieces and maybe say, this is, you know, and this is what this dollar amount will get us. I also think that this year, we put some things in. You vote it in January, if you agree with it, that maybe the price tag is $600,000 and not the $450,000 that we have in Chapter 70 of town funding. Knowing full well that maybe something has to be cut, but let's, I think this is the year that we talk about that and look at that so that the town and the committee, the town, know that with this amount of money, this is the things that we could potentially do to enhance our program. Knowing full well that if we don't get this amount of money, these are the things that we'll have to put toward the following year.
Well, the vision stuff is important because we want to try to include as much as we can in that budget presentation to show them the 5-year projection and where we'd like to invest.
Right.
So, yeah.
So why don't you why don't you suspend or not hold the meeting in November, but let the principals and administration take a look at what's been developed so far, come up with some plans on that, some ideas, both items that can be implemented at no cost or minimal cost,
Right.
and the bigger budget items. And the division committee can meet again.
December or January, depending on where we
It might
are.
be later in December or middle of January, because the end of January we'll be busy with, the first meeting will be budget, and the second and the last meeting will be getting ready to prepare for the finance committee and the releasing it that way, so.
Right, I think there are changes that can happen in the lower grades. I think what spurred this on, that we can make some changes. I mean, I went to the middle school meeting, and I walked in for part of it. I walked into the part where Mr. Goyette was talking about creating electives within the electives. And there was so much excitement when they talked about kids having choice and being able to choose ceramics, or, as Jerry would say, I am not an athlete. I don't want to be in physical education, or I do dance. I'd rather do guitar, or I'd rather do something else. When you talk about choice, people get excited. So what we need to go back now and say, how can we add more choices in? And so that's what our discussions are internally, and then I need to put a dollar amount on those changes. And then we're gonna be able to come to the school committee and say, we're gonna have half-year courses, we're gonna have to look at how, what are the requirements to graduate? There's a lot of,
That's okay.
it is okay.
Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. And this has been needed for a long time, so.
And it's
And
not
if we
gonna
don't do it
happen
now, we
in
never
1
will.
year, and it's not gonna happen in 2 years,
But if
but
you
over
don't
the next
start
3
now,
years.
But if you don't
Yes.
have a plan and don't start.
Yep.
Right.
it'll
Then-
never happen.
Lay out for you, this is what it costs.
And, we fully recognize too, some of these ideas, they're early. They're great ideas, but it's gonna take time to build that plan. We can project it, but we don't fully know the cost. We might have better view of it next year, the following year. The thing is, it's exciting.
Yeah.
So,
Just one other thing that, and the idea that we could say to a teacher, let's say some teacher has some incredible passion to build their own course. We need to be able to figure out a way to tap into the other interests that our faculty bring and our students bring, because as Mr. McCarthy said, that innovation course, he said it's incredible. The kids are so excited, they're jazzed, they have choice. How we bring that forward is really this work of the Vision Committee and us to make that a reality.
And that's where you get the teachers involved the same way. We can't forget that part.
Right. Can you imagine, I mean, when was the last time we said to a teacher, what are you passionate about? What would you, if you could design your own course as an elective, a half-year elective? Boy, I bet we could get some pretty neat programs for kids at all grade levels. Same thing in the elementary school. What if we tapped into that? And one day a week, we tapped in the passions of people, and we ran, there's so many things we can do, but we're still living in a prison
right, and
with boxes and boxes around schedules, and
yeah, and if you
The
asked
rest of the
everybody
world's
how
very
excited they were about what we got right now, I'm sure, most people, change is hard, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Change is hard, but people get excited about the possibility of being able to, step outside the box. You need to, because the rest of the world's gonna ask you to do it. So,
but we still live in a
Okay.
box.
Mhm.
Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
Our kids go to college. There's boxes around getting into college. You know, any parent who's brought their kids to school, you have to have X amount of community service, and you You gotta take trigonometry if you wanna get into this. You've gotta take 3
Yeah.
years of Spanish there, so
But you can make it fun, and that's the important thing.
we can.
And that's what I want to do. I don't want us to say, hey, wait till you get to college, you're gonna love it. It's, no, how about start loving it when you start school?
And
And
they-
what makes it exciting and fun, I want that to be all the way through.
I don't want the notion in this conversation that there aren't really fun things
No, no, no,
happening
no,
in Sutton
no,
Public
I
Schools.
agree.
There are.
There are, but I think, as the demands get greater, that level of excitement and passion goes, I'm sorry. I mean, I saw it in my own children. And then when they got to college, it was like the world opened up. We had options. We had,
Gotta take Algebra 2.
okay.
So, I mean, there's some realities
Right,
that,
but you can still make math
Sure.
fun.
yeah, but
It's
you,
all in how you do it.
So it's a
You can
balance.
still present that information, and the kids will learn better if they have an environment that really fosters them working to their potential.
I don't think there's any
So
disagreement.
I'll support you.
I don't think there's any disagreement.
Just a couple things on the schedule, just a reminder, the middle school STEM showcase is the 26th.
Yep.
From 12:30 to 2 in the high school, middle school gym. It's, we have fun night out and trunk or treat, and our next meeting is the 5th at 7 o'clock.
November 5th.
Anything else?
This is all in the district.
Sir, would you like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
The silent vote. Sorry.
It was supposed to be quick.